We do have a meeting in 3 weeks. I think it's only a couple items, so it shouldn't be too long.
Famous last words.
I'm trying to think what they are. I know one's Fred Rinaldi is coming in to who's that? What is doing over in East Rinaldi, former Kodak property. And I think there's another one application. Oh, something on Silverall Drive. I think it's just the two right now.
Have you been over to that property on East River? What is it, Rivers Run or something like that?
Oh,
What-
you
what
mean
are
the one that Fred Rinaldi's done?
Yeah, that gorgeous project.
I keep getting invited. Well, I keep asking, but I never get invited over. But I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I'd love to see that too.
Yeah, he said he was going to invite us to the ribbon cutting.
Well, I tell you what, he is going to be here in 3 weeks.
Jim, you are live and ready to go whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Becky.
We're gonna wait for Dan.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to wait a couple minutes for Mr. Mistrella.
Sounds good.
I'll give him a call, see if.
Are you checking it against your notes? I don't think there are many changes. There he is.
Maybe.
Morning, Jim. Oh, good evening and welcome to the Town of Henrietta Planning Board Workshop scheduled for Tuesday, July 28, 2020. Members present, Matt Borkowski, Patricia Brill, Craig Eckert, Stephen McIntyre, Lawrence Neal, and Rick Page. Town staff present are Chris Martin, Town Engineer, and Dan Mistrella, Planning Board Attorney. First item on the agenda this evening is the minutes for July 7th, 2020. The chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mrs. Brill. Do we have a sufficient second, please?
Second.
Who's that, Mr. Eckert? Mr. Page, thank you. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is application number PB 324, Forest View subdivision for final subdivision approval of a 47-lot residential subdivision with 90.6 acres of open space and a conservation easement area located off of Ward Hill Road in a rural residential zone district. Who's here representing the applicant this evening?
Good evening. I'm Ryan Destro from DMU.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you very much.
So since last meeting where we were granted overall preliminary approval,
Can you turn your microphone on, please? Thank you.
Just hold the button down.
And Ryan, if I may interject just a moment, Councilman Barley, I want to recognize your attendance this evening. Thank you very much. Ryan, thank you very much.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Thanks, Patty.
good evening. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ryan Destro from BME Associates. Since last meeting where we did receive overall preliminary subdivision approval. We did submit final plan application. The final plans are based on the approved subdivision, the approved preliminary subdivision. We did receive written comments from the town based on the final plans presented, and we did reply to them in writing. You should have that on file.
I want to thank you, Ryan, for doing that. That helps us quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. And in reviewing the comments, we don't see any issues in addressing them, and we're working on revising the plans as we speak. Also, since last meeting, we also did meet last Friday with town staff to review the trail connection that would be through the proposed parkland to identify the preferred route through the parkland to the Lehigh Valley Trail to the south. So with that being said, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Well, I will be happy to open up to the board in just a moment, but I want to turn it over to Mr. Mistrella because I know there was an issue that came up this afternoon that I think you wanted to address. Mr. Mistrella?
Do I have? Okay. All right, I did. Mr. Skomsky asked to meet with me this morning, which he did, and pointed out some issues that he believed were calculation issues as far as how many lots that the applicant can get out of this development, and the application of Town Law Section 278. And he followed up with an email at my request, which I shared with Mr. Martin and the chairman and vice chairman and the supervisor. And so I do want to address, his email should be made part of the record here, and I can give a copy of that to whomever. And I do want to address his concerns, at least some of his concerns, and then I'm going to ask the applicant to address some questions regarding others of his concerns. If you forget about Town Law Section 278, if it didn't exist, if it wasn't part of this application, this particular application meets all the requirements of the Henrietta Town Code for the rural residential with open land incentives, with the possible exception of lot size. So the only element of the application that New York law, Town Law Section 278 really applies to is lot size. And clearly, New York Town Law Section 278 allows the planning board to grant lot size variance if it results in a benefit to the community. And that's what they're asking for, and that's what this plan entails. So as far as the first part of Mr. Skomsky's questioning the calculations, I do not agree with his rationale. I certainly respect that he is entitled to that argument. And certainly if an approval is granted, he may bring that argument to a court. There's no question about it. His second point deals with the acreage that we're talking about for the countable acreage for the calculation of how many lots the applicant is entitled to. And that's a twofold question. The first part of his question is, how do you count the 5-acre parcel that's designated on the plan for a single-family lot if it's not part of the open space initiative, so to speak? So I'm asking the applicant, do you know what lot I'm talking about on your plan?
Yes, lot 47.
Okay. And, and is that one of the lots that is included in your overall calculation that entitles you to 47 lots?
That lot doesn't currently exist, so it's part of the overall property. So that 5-acre lot is included in 108.5 acres that the density calculation is based on.
And so my question is this: you've run these numbers and come up with that you're entitled to 47 lots, correct?
Correct.
So 46 of the lots are going to be the small lots, and the 47th is the 5-acre lot?
Correct.
Okay. So that is therefore accounted for in the overall calculations. And without the, you can't then include that 5-acre lot in the open space initiative, correct? That isn't part of the open space.
The open space initiative accounts for all the developable area on this property, which includes both the western parcel and the Larkin parcel, which totals 108.5 acres.
Let me rephrase it. Let me be more specific. What is your calculation of the percentage of open space that is being
It's not,
provided?
I understand. It's not part of the open space that we are taking credit for.
Okay, and the percentage that you are taking credit for is what percentage?
We're providing approximately 82% open space
Okay.
when 65% is required.
Okay, and with the 82%, that 5-acre lot is not part of that 82%, correct?
It is not.
It's part of the 18% of developed space?
Correct.
Okay. So that answers that question. And then Mr. Skomsky also questioned the including the stormwater management facilities that are proposed for this development in the calculation of the usable or developable space in the entire development. So it's my understanding that in your calculations, you eliminated the federal wetlands, which was a little more than an acre. Is that correct?
Correct.
But those stormwater detention facilities, ponds, are included in your 105 acres, correct?
Correct.
So the question is, can you use that in the overall calculation? Mr. Skomsky cited a case arising in Penfield from about 20 years ago. So it's a local case, local court, local appellate division, where the court said that under the Penfield statute, the developer had to submit a plan showing how the parcel could be developed in compliance with code, and then the other plan of how they intended to cluster. And under the Penfield statute, you had to exclude certain things, roads, water facilities, et cetera, that were shown on the standard plan instead of the cluster plan. You had to exclude those from the calculation of developable area. I've had the opportunity today to re-review section 278 and to re-review the Henrietta Town Code, the applicable sections of the Henrietta Town Code, and we just don't have those same requirements. It's true, section 278 doesn't allow greater density than you could have under your local code. But the way we calculate, there isn't a means of calculation provided in section 278. And the way we calculate it is different from how Penfield calculates it. So if what the applicant is representing in terms of acreage is accurate, and I think staff has reviewed it to determine that it is, then I do not see that this board is challenged or restricted from granting an approval if it feels an approval is appropriate. And of course, the board already has granted a preliminary plat approval. By the same token, the residents, anybody withstanding to challenge this, it can certainly avail themselves of those arguments in an Article 78 proceeding, and that has to be done rather promptly. There's a 30-day statute of limitations for filing. And the applicant and the town, but in essence, the applicant is going to be left to defend that challenge if there is an approval and a challenge. I'm not saying that the board has to approve this, but having done a preliminary approval, unless there's been some significant changes and learning that you can't do it would be a significant change. I can't advise you that you can't do it. It may well be up to a court, and I may well be incorrect in my analysis, but I'm providing you with the best analysis I can.
Mr. Mastrella, thank you very much. We appreciate your feedback on that, on this issue. The chair would just like to recognize the attendance of Supervisor Schultz this evening. Ryan, did you have anything else, or was it, did you turn it over to the board for discussion at this point? I'm sorry.
I agree with what Dan said, so I would turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you. Well, the chair will recognize Mrs. Brill, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you. Ryan, how did the meetings come out with the town regarding how the trails are going to be joined? Where are we at with that?
So when we walked it, we had staff from BME as well as the town and the applicant. When we were walking the trail, we marked out the areas where the trail was preferred with flagging. We also captured those flag locations with a handheld GPS, and then we're going to import those actual points onto our plans. So it will be shown on the next submission of our plans when we submit, addressing all of the final plan comments.
So the final decision has been made with the town. We just don't have the drawings yet.
Correct.
Thank you.
The routing has been determined in the field.
And that was everything else I had highlighted. You did answer, and we greatly appreciate that. That was the one thing that was outstanding. It was still a work in progress since this was typed up. So thank you for that. All set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Brill. Chair will recognize Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about everything that Mr. Mastrella has told us, and I want to know if it should be included in our minutes that he explained his position and that this board accepted his recommendation. Should that be included in the minutes?
For the record, Mr. Neal, I did take notes on it, and I know they're being recorded as well. So between the two of us, we will join all the minutes together. And it will most likely be, I think it's very important information to have that included.
I mean, anybody else want to weigh in on that? Go for it.
The only question I have is that if in fact you were to determine that the stormwater management pond or any other drainage facilities or pieces of that were to be eliminated from the overall calculation, does the applicant still meet the 65% number? If that's the case, then I don't know what the argument is.
Well, they would, I assume they would meet the 65% number, but what you're taking that acreage from is the total acreage of the project, and it's the total acreage of the project that determines the number of units that you can have, in conjunction, obviously, with the percentage. But if they don't have the 105 acres that they're claiming, then that's going to reduce to some extent the number of units that they
That's
can
the
put
part.
on.
Thank you very much. That makes it clear.
Supervisor Schultz?
So I also took the opportunity to review what Dan Mistrella shared, and the way this administration at least has always interpreted that one line in there where it talks about the buildable area on site, it's what the conditions are today. So if there is if you look at some of the acreage of lots, for instance, they extend out into the river, or they extend out into a pond or a lake. And so when we've always done it in terms of determining the buildable acreage, it's what the site looks like today, not what you're doing in the future. It doesn't seem to me that you should be penalized because you're putting in, so what if, for instance, they put in a recreational pond? Would they then have to subtract that out from the buildable area? It doesn't make sense in terms of determining units to me. The Penfield and the ruling in that case he shared, the Penfield ruling is very specific. And that's why, again, he subtracted out roads where there's the person who was objecting to this never even asked for removing roads, because again, that is specific to Penfield's section of code on how they do their cluster developments. They require them to do a full development first, count up all the houses that they could fit. And that's how they determine then how much they can do in the subsequent space. So they have to subtract out roads, they have to subtract out ponds, anything that essentially is not a house. They have to subtract it out, including if they had a park in there. That's, again, not how we've done the calculations under that. So when you read that section of code, it talks about you get rid of any wetland, standing water, or non-buildable area. And one of the things, in one of the areas, I think it's in the definition, I forget where, it also talks about slope greater than, 15%? So if it's really steep grade, we don't count that area. And that gets subtracted out ahead of time, but it's what the current conditions are. As far as the open space rules, we have always allowed for open space. So that's how you define the amount of buildable land. For open space, we do allow them to include the wetlands because it's still open in terms of the percentages, but it's not counted for any buildable space calculation, unit counts, anything like that. So that's how we've always interpreted it. One other thing to follow up, Chris and I went on that walk for the trail. We found a really good path. It leaves from essentially the southwest corner of the area that would have the pavilion or parking area. And there's we found a location where the path, there's basically a drainage swale that runs laterally that we'd have to cross. So we found the area that was the narrowest point, and it's maybe from here to the door where we're able to cross. The rest is all up on ridges. And then it connects down to some of the existing trails that were in there from Dr. Burns' property, including then it joins the Lehigh Valley Trail directly across from one of the main connection trails that goes over to the Long Branch area. So it's going to be a really nice trail when it's all done. We'll have to clean out a little bit of poison ivy. But you know, like I said, it can produce a nice trail. And we even found some secondary trails that we could potentially add later so that we can have some loop backs, so that you could do a short loop and a big loop. So from a trail standpoint, I think it's going to be a very nice addition to the town, and I look forward to what they are able to build. So assuming this is approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Neal, I believe the floor was yours.
Yes, I'm not sure how we as a board feel as though something, I understand that, Patty, that you're going to be adding something, but if there is a need to defend our position that we've approved this application, should we have some backup from our attorney indicating that we follow the right path?
Mr. Neal, I think we have that. I think Mr. Mistrella gave us his opinion, and
But I'm just saying for the minutes, we're talking a year from now. If we don't need it in the minutes, then fine, I'll move on. But is there any reason that we should have it in the minutes?
Well, I'll just address that. If there's a challenge made, then as part of the procedure, the town has to provide what's called a return, which is a record of the proceedings and the justifications. And this is a recorded session, and it can be transcribed and provided as part of that return so that the court sees exactly what was discussed throughout the process of the application.
So we'll just make sure the recording is saved for as long as the statute of limitations on when somebody can challenge. So that way, if nothing else, we can go back to the original, or again, if it's largely in 30 days, Mr. Mistrella can write a lawyer's opinion letter type of thing if it's necessary. So there's a lot of different ways we can resolve that. I think if Patty
Just want to
talks about it in the minutes, and again, we hold on to the recording, we'll be covered.
thank you.
Okay. Chris, I had a question for you. It had to deal with your comments number 5 with the sidewalks. And you were suggesting that the sidewalks be put in the county thing and not as an easement. Now, he came back and said, well, the problem there is that there are telephone poles or whatever in the easement precluding the ability to use that. Is there a way we can solve that, or?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think we would have to reach out to Winona County Department of Transportation to see what they would allow or not allow. It still may make more sense to put it within the easement, but here's my reasoning. Sometime in the future, we want to extend these sidewalks. And I think, obviously, one of the paths we'd like to go is to the west and connect to Lehigh, or East Henrietta Road. I don't think we're going to get easements from the other residents, or that it's going to be more difficult to get easements from the residents that are further down on the south side of the road. If we're going to put sidewalks in, I'd like to kind of keep them in the right of way, so we wouldn't have to get those easements in the future. So I'm trying to present this, I don't want a lot of jogs and dips and everything else in the sidewalk. I'd like to have as straight a sidewalk as we can. So we'll have to approach the Winona County Department of Transportation to see if they would allow it. If they do, that's where I would like to put it. If we can't, then we'll have to go back to the easement option.
Okay. So nothing's going to kill the sidewalks?
No, absolutely not. The sidewalks are a condition that we want to stick with, yes.
Okay. We're good there?
Yeah, I would only like to add that we were requested to provide an easement. That's why we had shown the sidewalk just inside the property instead of in the right of way. There are poles and a swale, but I think we could manage it, and we can coordinate with the town and DOT if that's the preference.
Okay. The last question I had to do with street trees. And we have 46 or 47 lots. But you're only saying that you're going to do 43 trees. That's what your response was.
My interpretation is the code allows either a tree or 2 shrubs, and we're providing more than the 2 shrubs account for replacement of street trees.
I understand that, but the question is simply, if you're going to put 43 trees in, how come 3 or 4 lots will not have a tree? I mean, I don't know if it's just a mistake or something. Maybe that's all it is.
I mean, we can work in a tree on every lot. That's not an issue. So we'll look to add the 3 trees that are missing, if they are missing from 3 lots.
Yeah, I mean, it could just simply be a typo. I don't know. But you're saying 43 trees and there's 46 or 47 lots.
Yep, that's not an issue to add.
All right, all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Neal.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add 2 cents.
Yes,
to that.
Mr. Eckert.
Sometimes, Mr. Neal, it is sometimes hard to get trees in a radial front lawn with all the laterals. I know we've come across this before. Mr. Martin and I have come across where the clean outs and the utility services that take up the majority of the front yard on a trapezoidal or conical type shaped lot. It's very hard to get a tree in. So a lot of times they go in and they just die. They come right out because they're in conflict with the utility. So that could be a reason for a couple of those lots not having something on the front. But barring that, Mr. Justro didn't make that comment, so I'm not sure if that is actually the conflict or not. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Eckert, I will give you the floor for your comment or questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I do not have any further comments at this point. We've
Thank you.
addressed everything. I've read Mr. Schultz's response to the lot sizes and to the questions that Mr. Mistrella went over, and I am comfortable with those answers. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair will recognize Mr. Borkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Just a couple comments. One, I know there's been a lot of talk about this. There's been a lot of animosity. I actually think for what you guys have been given, it's a pretty remarkable plan over time. I know it's not going to make some of the neighbors happy, but if they consider how much work went into making them as happy as possible when a developer can develop there, I think that that's a good thing. I still personally have safety concerns on road stuff that really doesn't have much to do with you. It's a DOT issue. So once again, I think the plan is pretty good. I'm kind of excited about the paths and the potential park there, even though that's going through residential. I'm still worried about the safety, but other than that, great job, guys.
I'll send Mr.
I am, thank
Borkowski. Thank you. Shall we recognize Mr. Page?
Thank you. You've covered most of it. With respect to the trail that you walked and Steve got poison ivy on, can you tell me a little bit more? Is it how wide it will be and what the material will be that they'll be walking or riding on?
So I didn't personally walk it myself. We had other people from BME. I wasn't able to attend the walk, but we would defer to the town and work with them to identify the appropriate width. Yeah.
Stone dust, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Because Heather yelled at me last time I didn't use the mic when I talked. So the trail, typically, it could be anywhere from 4 to 5 feet wide, probably about 5 feet. We've used stone dust in the past, but I think on the other subdivision for Trailview South, wood chips were used. And I think except for the steep areas, the wood chips have worked very well. And it's something that we could certainly have available to us in the future when we have to maintain the trail. So I would say probably 5 feet wide of wood chips, except for the steep sections. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, you said stone chips have been used in the past,
Stone dust.
but the preference on this is wood chips.
I will point out one of the other areas where there would be stone dust is out in the field where there isn't a tree cover. So the park, from the parking lot to the edge of the woods would be stone dust. Because out in the field, the wood chips will suddenly be sprouting all kinds of weeds. So we had looked at and we walked on some of the other trails where the wood chips work really well. We've talked about, so Mr. Eckert in his deputy town supervisor role, has been working on acquiring used telephone poles that we can either use to line some of the trail in certain areas, as well as in the few boggy areas, potentially put a boardwalk. We're going to have to build one bridge over that aforementioned swale. But otherwise, it would be wood chips. One of the things I will want us to do is wire, as it can be predominantly 5 feet, especially in this time of COVID. We should have some areas that widen out so that people can pass, some areas for passing, or if, you know, down the road, if we want to put in a bench for people to sit down. So, you know, different parts of the woods were denser, packed with trees. Other areas were pretty clear. Like I said, it was a really nice path, some decent up and down and connecting to the Lehigh Valley Trail. And then we all decided to walk back down the Lehigh Valley Trail and come back that way. It was a really nice loop. So like I said, I think it's going to be a really good addition.
Thank you, Supervisor.
And the last question about the trail, is this a combined effort with the town and the developer? Or in other words, is there any taxpayer dollars invested in the trail, or is it totally the applicant's responsibility to construct that? A lot of silence.
No, that would be the responsibility of the applicant for this.
The applicant? I'm sorry, Steve.
So again, the initial trail, my understanding is it's theirs. I'm looking at down the road, we're probably going to do some additional looping trails. But now again, if we have free material like the aforementioned telephone poles, you know, we'd provide that. We would provide some labor assistance, but in terms of material and the majority of the construction, my understanding is it's the developer. You know, one of the other things we have in abundance after every spring and fall at the brush site, we have a lot of branches that gets chipped up, and that's where we get our wood chips from. So that wasn't, again, a reason why we were looking at going wood chip, because we could replenish that as frequently as every year if necessary. So whereas I would see us providing material that we have, I was not planning to expend taxpayer funds for material. Again, people who are on the clock already might be offering some assistance as applicable, but the majority of the work is theirs.
My question was just about the construction, not the upkeep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I know that there's still work involved with the conservation easements for the open space and the conservation easement, as well as the fire access road. I'm sure you'll work that out. Just personal, for my information, the 4 residences that are going to be on Ward Hill Road that are going to have sewers put in, the 4 residents, probably by a separate, wasn't it sanitary sewers for those 4?
Correct.
Probably constructed by an outside person.
So
The 4 houses would have the ability to connect or not connect, right? And at the cost of connecting, the laterals would be on the owner, correct? Yeah, okay, thank you.
correct.
I guess,
Oh, you're not.
okay.
My telepathy.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Page. The chair will recognize Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
I did want to kind of embellish on one of the questions that was brought up by one of the panel members. The conservation areas that are going to be either accepted or rejected by the neighbors on Ward Hill Road, where is that at right now? Have discussions going on about that?
It's been presented to the neighbors, and I believe a deadline has been set, and within the month or so, I believe, that they have to make a determination whether they would accept that land or not. And if not, then the northern lot lines would just be extended and to accept that conservation easement area onto their lots within the subdivision.
Did you get any kind of a feel of whether they were going to accept it or reject it?
Again, Chris Martin, Director of Engineering and Planning. The town did reach out to the 4 applicants. We sent letter to the 4 property owners. Out of the 4, I heard from 2. The one to the extreme west, she wanted to know if they did acquire the property, what her tax increase would be because of that. And we haven't given her an answer yet. We're still kind of working out the details on that. And then the gentleman to the far right or to the east, he was interested in obtaining that land. The other two I've not heard back from yet, but I would like to say for the record that if they're still interested, I think we would still like to try to work with them to do that. I think it's in everybody's interest for them to own the property, because then they have control over it. But again, there could be an increase in taxes too. So from a homeowner standpoint, I can understand that as well.
Chris, you also made the comment that if they reject the including of the conservation easement, there should be some additional buffering and screening.
I would like to, Steve. The grade does drop off rather steeply in through there. And again, that's why I was trying to go with some of the trees and the shrubs. I know they're putting a landscape berm in with some shrubs. From a homeowner standpoint as well, I'd love to see maybe some pine trees, along the back that would, over the years would grow up high enough and maybe help, both the existing neighbors and the proposed neighbors.
Ryan, in the event that the conservation easements do get rejected by the neighboring properties, is the applicant on board for doing some additional screening?
Yeah, so we would definitely coordinate with the town and work out an agreeable solution. But as Chris did mention, there is a significant existing elevation difference, at least 20 feet from the rear of those properties to where the new house pads are going to be. The new subdivision is approximately 20 feet lower than the homes, 20 feet lower or more from the homes on Ward Hill Road.
Yeah, I think he did mention that the fact that the property does drop off, but I think he's looking for some additional screening, knowing that the property does drop off like that. Is the applicant willing to work with the town and try to provide some additional screening?
We are.
You are. Tree, if it comes down to trees or shrubs or whatever it needs to be?
We'll work with the town.
This is only in the event that it doesn't
Correct.
get accepted by one of the neighbors.
Right.
All right, good. The other question, Chris, while you're up there, I'm sorry. You had a question regarding the sheeting of water going across the sidewalk in one of the drainage areas. Are you looking for a culvert, some sort of an inlet?
I believe so. In the area I'm talking about. My concern is the sidewalk is extended to the property line. I live and I see the water, drainage or runoff sheet across the sidewalk. So I think there may be room enough for the applicant or the applicant's engineer to put in a 12-inch corrugated metal pipe or something like that, just so you don't have that issue.
How does the applicant feel about that? You didn't kind of respond to you just more or less said you'd talk about it, or?
Yeah, there's two options, and we can work out whichever one the town prefers. If one, you can widen this route to make it more of a sheet flow rather than a concentrated flow over that sidewalk area, or we could put in a 10-foot culvert pipe underneath it.
Well, usually you get around the winter months and the sheet flow, no matter how wide you do it, just turns to ice at some point, making the sidewalk unsafe unless somebody's salting it. So probably the culvert would be the way to go. Would you be willing to go that route?
We would.
Okay. I think I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Anything else for the good of the order from the board members?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. McIntyre.
Still not sure about what we're hearing from our attorney. Is our approval have to have some sort of a conditional statement in there in the event that it becomes a court challenge? We've done an approval or a disapproval?
No, if you approve it and there's a court challenge, then
we basically
a court will decide whether or not.
The court takes all the notes that we've done and
That's
records
correct.
and says, here's how they
Right.
got to that decision.
Right.
So we don't have.
So I
to-
just wanted to make sure there was a record of the objections and the responses to the objections, and we've done that, and that's where it stands.
Does the challenge have merit? I mean, he's got an argument, but he's basing the case law on something that doesn't apply to this town.
I can't tell you what a court is going to do. For instance, in the Penfield case that is cited, the lower court, the trial court, so to speak, affirmed a decision or overturned a decision, and the appellate court affirmed that court, but for entirely different reasons. So yeah, I can't, I mean, I'm telling you that I can't sit here and say, you do not have the authority to approve this based upon what's been presented. I don't think that's the case. I think you do have the authority to approve it. I can't guarantee that it's going to withstand a challenge, but truly the challenge is going to be borne by the applicant, much more so than the town.
Mr. Mistrella, if there were a court challenge, a litigation, and they overturn this, would that come back to this board and basically they would just have to adjust it and take a house out or two?
Well, in all likelihood, that's a possibility. I mean, it could be settled, perhaps. You know, I mean, a lot of different things could happen, but it's not like you're doing anything wrong, if that's your concern.
I'm just wondering what would happen in either event. I mean, if they were found that they couldn't do this, would it be fixed just by withdrawing one of the houses?
Potentially.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add one more thing to that.
Yes, Ryan, sure.
As mentioned, that was specifically towards the town of Penfield local law requirements. And it's my understanding that the town of Penfield does not allow ponds or stormwater management facilities on actual lots. That's one of the reasons they had that provision in their code to eliminate that from the density calcs. There's no provision in the town of Henrietta that does not allow a stormwater management facility on an actual lot. So that's another reason why that's not excluded from the density calculation. And as referenced by the town engineer at the previous meeting and clarified, surface waters represent, in the town of Henrietta, represent existing regulated surface water bodies, not proposed stormwater management facilities. And as I said, they can be placed on an actual lot too, so.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. Anything else for the good of the order from the board members? Okay, well, the board will, or the chair will entertain a motion on application number PB 324, Forest View subdivision, for final subdivision approval of a, yes.
Mr. Barley had something.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barley. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt. As liaison to this board, I'd like to say I appreciate the work that you've done on this project. I appreciate the work and the objections that Mrs. Skomsky has brought in, as well as Ms. Miller. I appreciate all the work that you guys have done. It's a very, very difficult. Our attorney also, very difficult. One thing that doesn't sit well with me is that of all our conversations, of all the discussions we've had here, we have never heard from our developer on record. He's not got up and said one thing about anything. He's whispered. If you look through our records, you will not find one word from Mr. Hinkle about this project. Why is that? Does it seem strange to you? Because it does to me. I worked on the zoning board. I've never seen this happen before. 10 years, never seen it happen. Here we are with a very important project that's going in our neighborhoods. We have a lot of discrepancies and a lot of consent from our neighbors and residents in that area about this project. And the person, developer, who's sitting here in this audience, has been here. must be a very bright person, hasn't said one word on record about this project. Please do. I'm looking to hear from you. The other thing is, and I'm glad you asked the question, Mr. McIntyre. I was wondering about if those neighbors were going to take that land or not. It would be nice if this board knew and the town knew if there was a cutoff date or any specific date for those people to make their decisions. So that this board knows what to do in handling if there's going to be any further development for the land that isn't taken. With that, I rest.
Thank you, Mr. Barley. Mr. Henkel, would you like to speak?
I'm Ron Hinkle, owner of Pinnacle Homes, developer that is proposing this development. I haven't gotten up for this because I do hire B&M to go through this, the ones that do the technical part of it. But I will say, I have been building now in Henrietta for 20 years now. There's been a lot of discussion that I haven't gotten up and defended myself on here. There's been a few people in that neighborhood that have said some things. For the most part, I'm willing to go back in there and ask for the majority of people there, because I've gotten a lot of phone calls since then. In the last 3 weeks, I've gotten 5 people from that neighborhood coming in, talking to me about new houses or their parents coming in. So all the talk of the neighbors, you know, we know of one that I built a house for that I've been back to talk to about that I have not known about her problems. She never brought it back to me. It was never in my punch list items in the house. 10 years later, she brings this up at the meetings and I've gone back to talk to her. I will address those things. Some of them that are legit. But my company is a family-owned business. It's myself, my son, and my daughter. And we're a small company. We're going through some hard times with the current times of COVID-19. We expected this. We were hoping that this would have gone through earlier. We are short on lots. We have 1 lot left right now in our Trailview South neighborhood. And for some reason, the duplexes have slowed down, but I've only got the 1 lot left. So I said, I've got reservations that are ready to go on this right now with people, and people from across the road who have said and come and supported me and said that, you know, they love the house they're in. I've got one lady who doesn't live in a neighborhood anymore that moved out when she got divorced. She wants to come back to one of our houses. So as many as I can say, more people that would support me that don't. So I am sorry I haven't gotten up and talked through the conversation about this, but I just felt that it wasn't worth what I had to say. But I do want to say that we are a small company and we are dependent on something like this to keep our business going. We address, I think I'm one of the best builders in the area or in the Rochester area to go back and address issues that we have with people. I've gone back with people that are 10, 12 years been in the project in their home, and you know they've got a problem. It's a maintenance type thing, but we've gone back and suggested stuff for them and helped them on that. So all that I've been hearing about, you know, the opposition here from a few people that actually know me and have built with me. I've got many more people that would support me and are coming in to build in this. So I don't think that this takes away from the neighborhood. It's the Trailview South neighborhood that we've got up the road is similar to it. It's a duplex project where we changed this to a single family project. I built the majority of those homes across the road on Branch Brook, Long Branch, and all that area over there. And once again, there's a few homes in there that we did not build. There's a third of the homes that we did not build, and there was another builder in there. And I know of the one couple that were in here complaining, we did not have nothing to do with the build of their home. So once again, I appreciate, you know, the time that you guys have put into this. There's been a long time with this. We've put a lot of time into it, a lot of money and everything into it. It's hard now that we've had to go out and purchase the property next door, the rights to the property next door to make this work. And no other developments that I know of have submitted this much open space to get only 46 units. None in this town, definitely, and none in most of the towns around. So we've got the least dense subdivision that has been proposed, I think, in this town. I may be wrong, but I don't see that that's ever the case. So again, You know, I do thank you for taking the time for this. I have pride in the business that we do build. I take exception when I hear people, you know, saying something about my business. My son and daughter in the business, you know, we take pride in our work and everything we do. And we feel that we're going to give everybody the best value that they can get in a home. If there's any questions I can answer from anybody, I'd be glad to do that.
Thank you, Ron. I'll open it to the board. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hinkle?
No, I will say something to Mr. Councilman Barley's point. As much as I won't comment about the level of happiness with your customers, because I've heard both, to be honest with you, I can tell you I've been at all these meetings, and it might not be a matter of record, which is why I'm saying it, but he has certainly spoken at a couple. It might have been the neighborhood meeting. I'm not sure which ones they are, but he has certainly gotten up and spoken a couple of times. And I remember one time, in fact, he was actually attacked. So I know he has spoken. So as a matter of record, I'm just saying I have heard him do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Ron,
it's my
thank you very much.
recollection too, if I may, a lot of people in Mr. Hinkle's shoes don't talk at these meetings. They utilize the engineers and the architects and the planners that they have hired, and they're just here with them. So that's the first thing I thought of, Mr. Barley, when you mentioned that. And I know he has relied on the expertise of the engineering team and architects that he's brought forth. Peter Bars spoke, and I know they were, you know, conversing about some of the questions that came up. But we appreciate your coming up tonight. We appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brill. Thank you, Ron.
Ron, Ron, I think the situation that I saw was that while you have a lot of satisfied customers, you have a few dissatisfied customers. And as the old saying goes, one oh darn eliminates 10 attaboys.
Right.
So I think during this next phase of your subdivision work, you should strive to try to make everybody happy.
Most definitely.
I know that's really difficult, but try to make as many friends on this one as you can.
And again, I would bring up in Trailview South, you know, we've done that, and we were going back to Harvest Hills. I was not the developer in that. That was Jim Irwin. That was not me. I did nothing to do with development there. I built the homes, so I had nothing to do with development.
Right.
Trailview South, I was the developer there, and yes, I had a learning curve there with, you know, with our ponds and a couple of things with the roads that we're taking care of there. I've taken well note of that.
Yeah.
And going forward, the team that we're using for this development is going to be well versed into the inspections and what needs to be done schedule wise.
You know, Jim could be a tough developer to work with.
Yeah.
Like I say, I challenge you to make everybody happy there.
Yep. That's what we try, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Record? Yes.
And I've just made comment on this, and I'll reiterate it just so we're all in the same room here in the same group as Mr. Hinkle has touched on. The growing pains or so that we've had with the Trailview South project have been notified. We have discussed them intently internally, and I have made the inspector, the town inspector, who's a NICET 4 certified inspector, very aware of an uptick or a continuance of inspections based off of our learning curve from the previous project. It'll be the same inspector, so he's very aware of Mr. Hinkle. So there's a communication there. There's some background there that can be utilized. I'm not giving him a new inspector to relearn communication with, but we have notified the inspector, again, if this project does go forward, that there will be a greater presence. And I have communicated that in this meeting a couple of times to make Mr. Hinkle aware of that concept.
Very good.
And
Thank you, Mr. Record.
he is nodding here as he has nodded before. Okay.
Thank you. Supervisor Schultz?
I just want to make one clarification for Rob, his last comment. In terms of the deadline, that is predominantly so that these guys can plan. But in terms of, you know, it really comes down to when they're ready to start grading, they're going to have to make that decision, that type of stuff. We already know what happens if they turn it down. Because the developer is already committed to any of that buffer area under the conservation easement that's not included in the neighboring houses would be added to the adjacent lots on the development side, the new development side. So either way, that buffer area is going to be part of someone's backyard. The question is whether it's the existing properties or the new properties. And in either case, there is a conservation easement over it, so there can be no structures, no building there. Or they could have a mowed lawn and picnic table, but they couldn't put in a shed or, any other kind of accessory structure or anything like that. No swimming pool, nothing that's considered a structure. Okay, so like I said, it's already been determined by this board what will happen if those folks turn them down. Okay.
My question and comment wasn't to what would happen, but I have questions from the planning board saying, would you be willing to buffer those areas that they don't take? So that's why I asked for some kind of decisions to be made, because I'm hearing Mr. Hinkle say maybe it depends on how much money it's going to cost, because he's got a lot of money in this already. So that's why I asked the question. Okay.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the developer is committed to working with the town to come up with if necessary, to come up with a buffering. So Mr. Henkel said yes.
And for the record, I do have that included in my notes.
Thank you, Mrs. Brill. Anything further from the board? Okay, the chair will entertain a motion on application number PB 324, Forest View subdivision for final subdivision approval of a 47-lot residential subdivision with 90.6 acres of open space and a conservation easement area located off of Ward Hill Road in a rural residential zone district. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, being my first time, I'll entertain that motion.
Ms. Record? Thank you very much. Do I have a sufficient second?
I'll
Got a
second.
motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Mr. Eckert? Correct?
Correct.
Yes. And a sufficient second, Mr. McIntyre?
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Who is that, please? Mr. Borkowski?
Traffic issues?
Yes. Same safety issues.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, great.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Borkowski, 8 o'clock.
8
Thank
o'clock on the
you.
nose.